men find it very hard to see any flaws in the women after the relationship ends. They struggle to see the things that didn't work out. They struggle to see the flaws in that person. Well, this is why a lot of men that I work with, they are severely struggling. I was just watching I was reading an article today from Psychology Today. This is one of my favorite. I love Psychology Today. It's like one of my favorite websites to visit when it comes to, like, you know, how the brain works, how humans operate, how men and women operate and vary. And on that article, they talked about how men find it very hard to see any flaws in the women after the relationship ends. They struggle to see the things that didn't work out. They struggle to see the flaws in that person because they always have this idea that eventually they could fix the relationship and they can make the relationship work in the future. So they don't want to think anything negative about the person. But for women, when they get to that point to break up with you, they have already checked out of the relationship a long time ago. They've already weighed the pros and the cons, and they are gone mentally. I can remember when I was in counseling, when I was in marriage, you know, the very first thing that the counselor asked us, she said, "Hey, are you guys checked out?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" She said, "It is between you and your wife. Are your bags packed at the door?" I'm like, "Not for me, no." And you know, she said, "No, not yet," because she was in counseling. And another thing that a counselor friend told me is when a man brings a woman into counseling, the relationship is usually dead. It's gone, because once women check out, they're gone. Once they're mentally, like, I don't see any more romantic feelings towards you anymore, they're done. But when a woman brings a man into counseling, they can usually salvage their relationship. You know, they can kind of help the man understand that, hey, this would be within your best interest to keep this relationship going and keeping it strong. Men who are anxious attachment men, they look a lot like beta males, and eventually the woman loses attraction for that person. I feel like the guys that grew up mother's boys, they ended up being anxious attachment men because we turn our romantic partners into our moms. We're going to need that text message back. We're going to need that pat on the head, that rub on the back, the rub on the shoulder, say, "Hey, you're such a special person. Hey, you're such a good coach, Court." We're going to need that. Like we crave it. Women are the ones, unless it's a woman who is an anxious attacher. All right. Okay. That's the exception. If it's a woman that has an unhealthy attachment style, then she'll be falling in love with you fast, but then it's not really real love. It is actually an unhealthy attachment. It's not even what healthy love is supposed to be. Okay, so I should have put in the title, you know, women fall in love in a healthy way slowly, but the anxious women do fall in love, and it's not actually love. It's just attachment. It's just, hey, I'm going to say what I need to say so I don't get abandoned. I'm going to do what I have to do so I don't get abandoned by you because I fear that abandonment. A lot of the women in our household, because they didn't have the male around the house, or the person was like either incarcerated or running the streets, or they just didn't want to be a dad. A lot of the women ended up marrying God. You know, they ended up going to church 3 to 4 times a week. They ended up becoming, you know, making Jesus their surrogate spouse. And it's not supposed to work that way. For a healthy, balanced young man or lady, it takes the masculine and feminine energy in the household. It takes both, you know. And if it's the woman that has the most masculine energy, let's say you do come up in a household where everybody was married. Well, your parents were married, all right? Let's say your parent was married, your dad, your mom was together, but the mom ran a household. And what ends up happening is you see this dysfunctional way of being in a relationship, and you may end up being the beta male in the relationship, because what usually happens is the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. I know you've seen so many times, or you've even experienced yourself, where you're like, I'm not going to marry somebody like my mom or marry somebody like my dad. And what ends up happening is you end up growing up and marrying somebody exactly like your parent. So if you saw a household where your dad was constantly being ran over and you're like, man, I don't know how dad's putting up with that. I can't deal with that. Eventually, you're going to end up attracting those people that was just like your mom. And you're going to end up being like, yes, dear. No, dear. Dad would say, happy wife, happy life. I'm dying laughing. Okay, now if you explain that, that's very broad. If you can explain that and break it down to people, to men, to help them understand what happy wife, happy life means. Happy wife means that she wants somebody that's dominant, that's alpha, that can help run a household, that can take care of the finances, that's going to help them make decisions, that's going to be in the best interest of the family. But what most people get is happy wife, happy life means to say yes to everything. And that's where the train wreck happens. Exactly where it happens. Because after a while, she started to lose respect for you. She started to lose respect for you as a man to be able to run the household. She lose respect for you in period. You know, to be able to raise the kids, there's going to be little bickers, little bickering, little arguments. And you're talking to somebody who was married for 9 years in the 60s.